Hello. The program you're about to watch is about the judicial system locally, Cook County Circuit Court system. We are honored to have two distinguished judges to give their perspective on how what they do affects you in Morton Grove and the village you live in. I hope you enjoy this and find it very informative. Thank you.
And welcome to another edition of MGTV. I'm Christopher Michael. You know the old saying, judge not lest ye shall be judged? Well, that only goes so far, because what happens if you're a judge? Now you've got no choice. But we do have a choice in who we talk to, and we've got a couple of judges with us this time around. We have, first off, Larry Axelrood sitting immediately next to me, who is an associate circuit court judge in Cook County, and Geary Kull, who is a full judge in the circuit court in Cook County. And we're going to talk about, first off, what it's like to be a judge, how you get to be one, and some other things as we go along the way. Hope you're interested in it, because I know I sure am. First off, let's talk with you, Larry, and ask you, how did you become a judge in the first place?
In 2005, I was elected by the full circuit judges to a position as an associate judge. I filed approximately a 35-page application about all of my trials that I had done and my experience, my education, personal history. I was vetted. I went through all of the bar associations, and they evaluated me. I then went through a process where I was interviewed by approximately 12 to 15 presiding judges, and then I was selected to go on to the next round of 300 candidates. I think that 40 went to the next round, and eventually 20 of us were elected. After getting to the next round, I then had to be interviewed by all of the full circuit judges. That I did that by running around the entire county to get to all the judges. They interviewed me. We talked about my experience. We talked about my education. We talked about my trial work. And eventually they voted, and I was elected. And it was June 1st of 2005, and I've been very happy. I love my job, and it's great to wake up in the morning looking forward to going to work.
Now, Geary, you've been around perhaps a little bit longer in this judging game.
In 2009, I guess it was June of 2009, then Chief Supreme Court Justice Thomas Fitzgerald appointed me to fill a vacancy on the Circuit Court of Cook County. That was a full circuit vacancy, a county-wide vacancy. In order to have that happen, I did, as Larry just indicated, have to be vetted by all of the various bar associations. I did so, went through the various interview processes, filled out all of the applications. They, of course, screen all of the people who have been worked with you, worked against you, and took those. Those ratings then resulted in my being highly qualified by almost all the bar associations, as I believe Larry is. After my appointment, I sat for about a year and a half, but in order to maintain my position, I had to run for election. I ran for the 9th Sub-Circuit seat that was formerly held by Sandra Otaka, and we ran in 2010, February 2010, and we're fortunate enough to win. Now, the election process there is a little different than the election process that Larry talks about. This is the general public that votes within the 9th Sub-Circuit, which includes a great portion of Morton Grove, if not all of it. And that process is a little different in that the people who are voting are not necessarily as informed as perhaps the judges were informed when they voted for Larry to be an associate judge. So it's a different position to the extent that it's elected by the general public, but it actually would do the same things on the bench pretty much.
This really kind of prompts a question that I was going to ask later, but now I think seems a good time. When we talk about the election of judges, what do you think of the current system? Is it really a good one or not?
Well, it's the system that we have. It can be good and it can be bad. There have been people that have been elected for all the wrong reasons, and there are people that have gotten through the system and been elected that are excellent judges. The process that I went through, and I am going through the elective process now, but the process I went through to become an associate judge is pretty close to merit selection. And then the elective process is open to anybody. There are people that would never apply to be an associate judge because they know that they won't have the qualifications and experience, who then will get on the ballot and hope that they win, and then they become a judge. And the problem that we have is that occasionally someone slips through that is wholly unqualified to be a judge, and then judges make important decisions. Judges can decide to take away your home, they can take away your children, they can take away your liberty, place you in jail. Up until recently, they could take away your life. And you want to have the most experienced judges possible. And hopefully the people that are going to vote will take the time to look at the newspapers and look at which publish the Bar Association evaluations. Because when you have 11 bar associations evaluating candidates, and in my situation they have all given me their highest evaluation, and it separates me from the people that want to, that are running against me. And it allows the people to say, well, this person is, the Bar Associations unanimously agrees the most qualified. And that helps them. Unfortunately, sometimes people go in and they'll vote for reasons that aren't well thought out and considered, and that could result in the wrong person being elected, in my opinion.
Yeah, as Larry points out, I think the fact that you have qualified judges is probably the most important thing. We're fortunate in this sub-circuit, which is what Larry's actually running for here, to have a high number of professionals, legal people, lawyers who practice in front of judges. And those are the people who really have an understanding of how important it is to have a qualified and experienced judge, because on a daily basis they see the quality of a good judge and what a good judge can do in a situation to either dispose of a case, move a case forward, as opposed to one who doesn't have experience and is possibly ruling the wrong way because he or she has not had the experience necessary in order to hold that position. It's really hard to say that a judge should learn how to be a judge while he's already on the bench, he or she is already on the bench. You should probably have a good grasp of the law and experience within a courtroom before you're put in that position, because the first time you're out there, I see it happen in traffic court a great deal, which is a first assignment for a lot of new judges. Traffic court's a very important place for people who are maybe losing their license in these DUI trials or things of that nature. And yet you have people who are just learning how to be judges, trying to rule in those situations. Now those people do the best job they can, but experience is, of course, the best qualification to have.
One thing that's interesting is that when lawyers come to a courtroom, they open a door, and when they see who's on the bench, they either have an expression of, oh, thank God, where they're relieved that that person is there, or, oh, no. And you want to be a judge that when they come in that's, oh, thank God. You never want to be the judge that it's, oh, no.
To be a good judge, of course, you have to be very familiar with the law and use that as your primary decision-making information. But how much does emotion play into it?
I think that as judges, you have to be cool, calm, collected, and you have to bring a sense of tranquility to the proceedings, because when things are emotional, sometimes that creates a problem, and the judge has to set the tone. There are jury instructions, and in jury instructions they talk about that you shouldn't have bias or improper motives, prejudice, but you also can't be emotional when you do something. In new judges school, we've been taught that if you get to a point where you're really hungry or you're tired or someone is agitating you, that you need to take a break, because if a judge is angry, we're human. If a judge is angry, tired, emotional, cranky, we may say or do something that's improper, and so emotion is something you have to be very careful about. There are instances where we feel something, but we have to remain professional, and we have to make sure that proceedings follow the law, and that we, as best we can, separate emotion from the law and the facts.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The general analogy of a judge is either an umpire or a referee, someone calling balls and strikes or calling the fouls. And of course, an umpire or referee or anyone in that capacity has to control the game. And the game, of course, in our situation, our trials or the courtroom in and of itself. If you lose control or show some emotion, those around you will immediately fall into place in the same way. So,
something we are all, I think, concerned with the number of people in our jails, and yet we see some people going in time and time again. As a judge, How do you feel when you see someone come into the courtroom for the third, fourth, fifth time?
Well, that's an interesting question because I am, in addition to my regular duties, I'm now running 2 specialty courtrooms, Veterans Call and the Mental Health Call. And what we're doing with those courtrooms is we're trying to break that cycle. We're trying to create alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders. With the Veterans Call, I work with the Veterans Administration. I went through an extensive training program, which was one of the most fascinating days that I had. Was a day that during this education process that I went through a program that the psychiatrist at the VA puts on for other healthcare providers. And part of that program was video that was shot from the perspective of a helmet camera from a soldier that was in Tikrit. And he was just 4 minutes of him driving down in a convoy down a main street in Tikrit. And it was so intense that I had sweated through my shirt and the adrenaline went through that I was exhausted at the end of that training program. And we're using programs like the Veterans Call and the Mental Health Call to try and break that cycle. We're trying to get treatment. It costs less to treat somebody than it does to incarcerate somebody. But if we have these people that are going through the revolving door, as some people would call it, nothing's going to break that cycle if we don't intervene. And we're trying to do that. There's a number of specialty courts. I think it's 19 now in Cook County. I do 2 of them. The Veterans Court Call that I do in Skokie is now the 2nd largest Veterans Call in the state of Illinois, and it's approximately 2 years old. So we are making efforts to try and break that cycle of incarceration. I've heard it called the prison industrial complex. But fundamentally, as judges, we have to make decisions every day, and one of the most important decisions we make is the person in front of us, are they a danger to other people, or are they just a danger to themselves from the bad decisions that they make? And people that are dangerous to society, they have to be separated.
And I think something we saw just last week was a man who was arrested for extended child molestation. They gave him a $50 million bond. That's a way to keep somebody away from the rest of the public.
Yeah, it is. And although a $50 million bond is like a gajillion-dollar bond, I mean, at some point in time, we're saying numbers just to say numbers or just to get attention, perhaps. You know, the situation that you talk about, I have some familiarity with. And the circumstances there, the courtroom was full of people in the community. And the people in the community were not there to support the victims. They were there supporting the individual who was charged. So at some point in time, you cannot lose sight of the fact that people who are charged with offenses are innocent until proven guilty in some fashion. Just because you're charged doesn't mean that you should immediately be subject to a $25 million bond. Bond is supposed to ensure your presence. It's not supposed to ensure that you remain incarcerated. One of the things that Larry was just talking about in terms of trying to break the cycle, we should look at, or you should look at, the juvenile court system that we have in Cook County. The juvenile court system is loaded with highly professional probation officers and resources, and they try to break this cycle early on. The probation system in juvenile court is actually functional. It tries to get kids back in school. It gets people jobs. It tries to make sure that they stay out of trouble, and they're monitored by the probation officers. Unfortunately, as we get to the adult system, there isn't enough resources, enough probation officers, enough time in the day to monitor the people that are on adult probation. So our system does try, as Larry indicated, to keep people from that revolving door. Unfortunately, when you see people at 30 years old who've been in the penitentiary 2 or 3 times, there's not a whole lot of opportunity out there for them, whether they want it or not. So after a year of being out of the penitentiary and on parole, trying to find something to work, some way to work, and there is no way, you generally fall back with the same people and run into the same bad decisions.
I think that one of the best antidotes to crime, jobs. If somebody has a decent job, they're going to go to work, they're going to make money, they're going to come home and they're going to be tired because they've been at work, or they're not interested in going out and committing crimes because they don't need to. We've lost all kinds of job opportunities that they're gone. There's no steel mills, there's no factories, there's no industrial, and these are all decent paying, either blue collar or what they call skilled or semi-skilled jobs. They don't exist anymore. And so when you take a kid who at 15 drops out of high school, there was a time where he could have some problems, but then maybe his uncle got him into a union, or maybe he got a job at a factory and worked his way up, and by the time he's 30, he has a stake in the conformity of society, and he's making a living, he has his family. There's no opportunity out there, and that puts added pressure on the system that we're in, because in order for someone to succeed, there has to be an avenue towards success. And if there's no way for them to work and support themselves, inevitably they become frustrated, and it's difficult for them to not become recidivists.
And that certainly keeps you guys employed, doesn't it?
There's no shortage of work. There's no question of that.
You know, something that I think a lot of people in the public say sometimes when they see someone who's charged with a horrendous crime, they say, "Oh, just take him out and shoot him." Well, you know, obviously you can't do that. So how do you deal with a case like that when it comes before you, when you know almost from the get-go, before you even hear anything, that the facts are stacked against this guy?
I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about emotion. When they come to court, it's not the emotional lynch mentality. As a judge, you set the tone and you say, we're going to follow the law, and this is going to take time. And people will be highly charged about a case when it first happens, but a year later, as it's going through the system and the lawyers are trying to prepare the case, usually people calm down. And you may have, recently there was a verdict in a police murder case where a police officer was murdered at 26th Street that was incredibly emotionally charged at the end. But by and large, when something horrible happens, over time that raw emotion dissipates, and we're able to deal with it in a professional manner and follow the law. And I think that's one of the things that keeps our society, the fabric, together, is the ability to redress these horrific events in a way that gives people redress, and there's comfort in knowing that it's going to be handled in a professional way, following our system of law, which goes back beyond the foundation of our country.
Along those same lines, probably the most important part of a case with horrendous facts like that is that it's done right the first time. And that's where you get back to whether or not you have experienced judges in a position to do that. The only way cases are reversed is when mistakes are made, and mistakes are generally controlled by the judge in the courtroom. So trying a case a second and a third and a fourth time is the result of mistakes that are made in the courtroom. Experienced judges hopefully are the judges who don't make those mistakes or allow those mistakes to happen, so that there can be some finality to a serious case, as Larry's indicated, no matter what that final judgment might be.
You know, Geary had over 30 years of experience when he became a judge. I had over 20 years. But the experience we had was significant. We were trying really important, heavy-duty cases. Geary was at 26 in California and other places. I was at 26 in California. I did a lot of federal work. I went through different jurisdictions. So I was exposed to judges in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, federal judges, state judges, and Geary and I both had the ability to see what an excellent judge was and what a judge that we thought was not a good judge, and everything in between. And we can emulate those characteristics of the excellent judges, and it helps us define what type of judge we want to be and how we want to preside over a courtroom. And it is from all of that experience being distilled through the years of practice and all the different influences we had that gives us the basis to deal with these cases that are highly charged or something unusual happens. There's not anything that would come up in Geary's court that Geary has not had happen before. So it may be a variation, but there's nothing that Geary hasn't seen before. And so when we're faced with these situations, it's experience that makes the difference.
I agree with that. I would say this, rather than these magnificent cases that you talk about, I think the hardest case for me, at least, is the first-time offender cases, the minor cases, which are poor decisions, especially by young kids, high school kids, teenagers. Those are the ones that are even more important, because adverse findings to young people, can stop them from going to college, can prevent them from getting scholarships, can prevent them from getting jobs, all at a time when I think we've discovered that the adolescent brain really isn't as mature as we think it is at the age of 17, 18, 19, and even 20. So those are the more difficult decisions to make, because you have to balance the law plus what the ramifications they are, not immediately for the individual, but what the long-term ramifications are. And I think that's an important thing to keep considering.
When you see a high school kid or someone just out of high school coming to your court, and you see the parents, they're there and they've hired an attorney, the anguish on the face of the parents is something that you don't forget. And you're dealing with people's lives, and you have to try to do justice. And you have to try, in a way, to make sure that the right thing happens for the right reason. Sometimes our hands are tied, and they've done something that there's no redemption. But many times, based on our experience and based on what other people have done in the past, we have more resources and opportunities to do the right thing than someone who doesn't have the experience.
One of the things that this points up is that being a judge is also a job that's filled with a lot of stress. How do you deal with that?
I don't know, I guess we're used to it. As a private attorney, defense attorney, at least for me for 35 years, I tried death penalty cases on a regular basis, was a lead attorney in the capital litigation group, and so stress was always part of it. And it was coupled at that point with trying to make a living at the same time with trying heavy cases. So actually the stress at this point isn't anywhere near that. I show up in the morning and I deal with each case as it comes by. So although all of those cases are important, I'm not under as much stress. I'm just not under as much stress. I think that's the easiest way to put it.
I think that Gary's analogy earlier about being a referee is apt and is appropriate at this point, because, like Gary, I had the stress of trying the case, being the lead attorney on these cases, and it may, whether it was state court or federal court, whether it was in Chicago or in Cleveland or Cincinnati or Michigan, where in addition to having to do the case, you have to deal with living and being away from your family. And now we come and we have more control over our life, and we're watching the other lawyers, and what we're doing is making sure that the trial follows the rules and that it's the decision, the outcome is fair and based on the evidence. And that's a different mindset. You go from being a player where you win or lose to being a referee where whoever, you know someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, and you want to make sure that what you did not adversely affect the outcome, that you made sure that everything was followed correctly and the outcome was appropriate.
What's your favorite part of the job?
I suppose actually making the decisions. I think, for the longest time as a lawyer, I advocated for a decision to be made, was frustrated by what I believed to be the wrong decision. Here, whatever decision I make, it's still my decision. I have a great deal of faith in my decision. I have a great deal of faith in Larry's decision-making process also. But it's my decision, and I'll live with it one way or another, and I believe I'm doing the right thing.
My favorite part, I'll say in terms of court, I love doing a jury trial where the courtroom is packed and there's a lot at stake, and to me it's incredibly exciting, and being able to be in control of that and making sure that this trial is done properly and it comes to an outcome. And there's a moment where, when I was a trial lawyer, I would watch the verdict form go from the jury foreperson to the judge, and the judge would be looking at it to make sure that it's done correctly. And that moment seemed like the longest moment of my life, and I could feel the blood pumping in my earlobes. There was so much adrenaline and passion. And now I am the one who is seeing that, and so I know what happened. And I think that it's incredibly exciting, that moment when a jury returns a verdict. I think that's incredibly exciting. Now, the other aspect of it, outside of the courtroom, I've done marriages and civil unions, and it's nice after the things that we do where something bad may happen to be able to do something as joyful as uniting two people that are in love and want to share the rest of their lives together. In fact, in the civil unions, I think I did the first one in the state because the law became effective and it said that you get the license one day and then you can do the marriage the next day, and we did it at midnight. And so two of my friends that had been together as long as my wife and I had been together were able to have this civil union. And walking out of the house at about 1 o'clock in the morning, it was a tremendous feeling to know that now my friends had the same rights that everybody else did. And that, I think, was doing weddings or unions. I think that's something outside of court that really gives me a lot of joy.
Well, gentlemen, I have to tell you, this has really been a very interesting half hour to spend with you, and I'm glad we had this opportunity. You've been watching MGTV, and our guests this time around, Larry Axelrood and Geary Kull. Both of them are Cook County Circuit Court judges, and they've been talking about the judging career. We hope you've enjoyed the program. Make sure you stay tuned for another edition of MGTV coming up soon.